afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Human fertility in the modern world has been divorced from God. It's marked now by profound moral confusion and a truly emotive utilitarianism. So we, the church, must be alert not only to the evil that parades as evil, but more insidiously to the evil that's masquerading as virtue. Among the most heart-wrenching examples of this deception is this newfound question of so-called embryo adoption. This practice, while appearing noble and compassionate, offering frozen human embryos, abandoned infertility clinics a chance at life, is in truth a deeply flawed moral undertaking that too many well-meaning Catholics have embraced under the veil of misplaced charity. There's a Church Life Journal article called The Embryo Adoption Problem, authored by the Catholic theologian Rachel Coleman, and it offers a deeply sobering critique of this issue. Coleman reminds us that embryo adoption is not merely an act of rescue, but the participation in and the perpetuation of a gravely immoral system, namely in vitro fertilization. Coleman notes, participating in embryo adoption may not only contribute to the embryo freezing system's ongoing operation, but also its moral normalization. This isn't mercy. This becomes a counterfeit form of compassion, divorced from the fullness of Catholic truth. Benedict XVI warned us that charity without truth is blind. In an emotionally charged culture that worships reproductive autonomy, many Catholics are finding themselves seduced by this narrative of, quote-unquote, saving the unborn frozen in nitrogen tanks. But this narrative, if not properly morally scrutinized, becomes a Trojan horse that smuggles in grave moral error. Do not be deceived, Paul warns us, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. Embryo adoption, for all its sentimental allure, is inseparable from the machinations and machinery of IVF. It's really simply another phase of the same process. Human beings, made in the image of God, are created not in the embrace of conjugal love, but in laboratories, manipulated, catalogued, and frozen like medical specimens. To practice in embryo adoption is to cooperate, however unintentionally, with that same technological deconstruction of the biological procreative act. The child becomes not the fruit of the marital act between one man and one woman, permanent, lifelong, and indissoluble, but a product of science, selected for implantation. Others are discarded or lost because they're deemed not viable. Borrowing from Coleman once again, it's reproductive consumerism in ecclesial vestments. No degree of well-meaning intention can erase the fact that this process is not natural procreation. It severs the essential unitive and procreative dimensions of marital intimacy. Donum Vitae, put forth by the DDF, but then the CDF, Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, declared, the child has the right to be conceived, carried in the womb, brought into the world, and brought up within marriage. It is through the secure and recognized relationship to his own parents that the child can discover his own identity. So what quote-unquote embryo adoption does, really it's embryo transfer, is it mechanizes the process of the conception of the life of the child. And it's not only the process that's problematic. The success rates of embryo transfer are alarmingly low, and each failed attempt often means the death of a small handful of human persons, because some embryos will be deemed not viable. The one that is deemed viable has a tremendously high failure rate of implantation. Coleman notes, the failure rates of embryo transfer are high. Approximately 70% of transferred embryos do not survive implantation. This is not just a statistic, it is a litany of preventable deaths. In the name of hope, hundreds of tiny lives are sacrificed. The Catechism is unequivocal about this. Catechism 1759 and 1756. One may not do evil so that good may result from it. A good intention does not make behavior that is intrinsically disordered good or justifiable. Thus, even if a child is successfully born from this method, the question remains, at what cost? If the moral calculus includes the deliberate endangerment of dozens of embryonic human beings, how can this be consistent with the gospel of the sanctity of human life? You and I must never diminish the genuine suffering that infertility causes. I want to make very clear here, this is a deep wound. It's a deep cross, one often borne in silence. My bride and I struggled with that in the early part of our marriage. It's a cross that's pierced with tears and unanswered prayers. But crosses are not meant to be circumvented by morally dubious means. They're meant for us to undergo, to carry, to unite to Christ, and offered for the salvation of the world. Infertility is not a license to take possession of children by any means available. To desire a child is noble, it is natural, and it is to some degree even supernatural for those who cooperate with sacramental grace. But to obtain a child through morally illicit means, even for a good end, is to mirror the very fallacy of Saul in the scriptures, disobeying God's command in order to do something good. We see this in 1 Samuel 15. The prophet Samuel says, to obey is better than to sacrifice. And herein lies the real temptation. In our desire to, quote-unquote, save embryos, we risk, and this is inevitable, we risk perpetuating the very system that created their plight. Because the moment a group of individuals come forth with a desire for embryo adoption, it creates a market. So we risk validating the production of embryos outside of the marital act, justifying it with our tears and pious intentions. To understand the sacredness of life's beginning, we must understand the body as gift, the reproductive capacity as gift. The womb is not a biological rental chamber. It is the sanctum wherein God knits together the human soul in cooperation with the natural procreative act of bride and bridegroom. The act of allowing implantation of an embryo conceived outside of the conjugal act into a womb that has no spousal connection to the child's father, or sometimes even mother, is to bypass the nuptial meaning of the body. We see this in John Paul's theology of the body precisely. And such implantation creates a moral and metaphysical rupture. It separates motherhood from the marital act. Unlike adoption of the already born child, an act of Christian charity deeply consonant with Catholic anthropology, embryo adoption intervenes at the level of origin and procreation. As Coleman writes, it is not merely postnatal care, but maternal care for gestation, something that the embryo has a right to receive in justice from the woman whose oocyte really was used in his or her conception. It is the child's biological mother that has that moral onus. To deny this is to deny the child something owed to them by right, not to be granted by convenience or in this case science. Underlying embryo adoption is a flawed anthropology, an even more dangerous pseudo-soteriology. The belief that we become saviors of frozen embryos, even if it perpetuates a greater moral evil. We are not the saviors. Christ is. Our role is not to rescue life through any means necessary, but to obey the law of love within the bounds of moral truth and admit that there are some bounds that prevent us from doing what we desire to do. If we accept the mechanized logic of embryo adoption, we subtly embrace the commodification of children. We implicitly affirm the laboratory as a legitimate place of human origin, and we participate, unintentionally perhaps, but no less really, in a culture that treats children not as gifts, but as products. The right answer isn't adoption of embryos, but opposing the entire IVF industry. This includes embracing licit alternatives, Naprotec being one. But there are some people for whom even that doesn't help. In that situation, however, know this. The Church has pronounced that one cannot use quote-unquote embryo adoption as a means of curing infertility. The solution to this crisis is not technocratic manipulation of embryos, but the conversion of hearts across the nation and across the world. So let's not be fooled by pious emotive language. Let us see children as gifts that are begotten, and that begetting lies in the mystery of God's love made flesh and in the conjugal union between bride and bridegroom within the sanctity of marriage. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.